I never thought a simple evening in my own home would leave me questioning everything I believed about myself. When I say I regret what happened, I mean it in the deepest way possible. But regret doesn't erase the memory. It doesn't erase the moment where something innocent shifted into something I can't forget. Life in our house had always been steady, predictable even. My partner worked late shifts, and I often found myself carrying the role of caretaker, trying to keep the home in order and make sure everyone felt looked after. It wasn't unusual for me to step in where I was needed. That's what families do, or at least that's what I told myself. But somewhere in that ordinary rhythm, something unthinkable unfolded. That evening, the house was quiet. My partner had just left for work, and the faint hum of the television in the background filled the silence. I was folding clothes when I heard a call from upstairs. It was my stepson, his voice sounding both casual and slightly embarrassed. At first, I thought maybe he needed a towel or had forgotten something, but when I walked toward the bathroom, I realized it was more complicated. The steam from the bath fogged the air, and water was spilling over the edge onto the floor. He had slipped while trying to adjust the faucet and knocked the shampoo bottle across the tiles. His tone was half frustration, half plea as he asked for help. There was nothing unusual about it, at least. That's how it should have been. I stepped in naturally, grabbing a towel, kneeling to mop up some of the mess, scolding him lightly for not being careful. But as I leaned closer, I became aware of how close we were, how small details suddenly seemed sharper than they should have been. His hair clung damply to his forehead, and water dripped down his shoulders. He looked at me with an expression that wasn't childish, wasn't playful, but something heavier. And in that split second, something shifted inside me. I brushed it off, telling myself not to overthink it. After all, I was only helping. That was the truth. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the pulse in my chest, the way I was suddenly hyper-aware of every movement. I told him to be more careful and helped steady him as he stood. My hand lingered just a moment too long on his arm, and I hated myself for noticing how natural it felt. The room felt warmer than it should have, the air thick. I could sense his hesitation too, a look in his eyes that mirrored the confusion in my own. I told myself it was my imagination, that I was reading into something that didn't exist. But deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining it at all. I grabbed the towel, handed it to him quickly, and turned my head, desperate to break the tension. He muttered a thank you, his voice low, almost uncertain, as though he too felt the weight of something we weren't supposed to acknowledge. My heart was racing, though I tried to act calm, stepping back, insisting he could manage the rest. When I finally left the bathroom and closed the door behind me, I leaned against the wall, my chest heaving with a mix of emotions I couldn't name. Shame burned through me, but so did something else I couldn't admit, even to myself. It had been an ordinary moment, yet it left me rattled, questioning why such a simple act had felt so charged. For the rest of the evening, I couldn't shake it. I replayed the moment over and over, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Just a misunderstanding of my own mind. Just a tired brain twisting reality into something dangerous. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. I had felt something I shouldn't have, and pretending otherwise didn't change it. I moved through the house, cleaning up, making dinner, distracting myself with every task I could find. Yet no matter how busy I tried to keep my hands, my thoughts kept drifting back. His expression. My heartbeat. The way a simple act of helping had turned into something more. Something forbidden. And in that silence, when the house was dark and I was left alone with myself, the weight of guilt grew heavier. I hadn't crossed a line, not yet, but I had stepped dangerously close to one, and the memory of that closeness clung to me like the steam from that bath. The next morning should have been like any other. I brewed my coffee, sat by the window, and tried to shake the strange thoughts that had haunted me the night before. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I had overanalyzed a simple situation, but no matter how much I tried, the uneasiness stayed with me. My chest tightened whenever my mind wandered back to the look in his eyes, that brief moment of closeness. It was supposed to mean nothing, and yet it meant everything. When he walked into the kitchen later, freshly dressed and casual, he greeted me with a simple smile, and I felt my stomach twist. It wasn't the smile of a child to a caretaker anymore, it felt different. I kept my eyes low, pretending to be busy with my coffee, but I could feel his presence like heat radiating through the room. I hated myself for noticing. I hated myself even more for not being able to stop noticing. The day passed quietly, but inside, I was restless. Every ordinary word we exchanged felt loaded, every casual movement seemed to carry a weight I didn't know how to handle. I tried convincing myself it was all in my head, a projection of my own loneliness. But if that were true, why did he glance at me in a way that lingered a fraction too long? Why did his tone sometimes soften when he spoke to me, as though we shared a secret no one else could see? That night, when I finally lay down to sleep, the images refused to leave me. I stared at the ceiling, torn between guilt and a strange pull I couldn't deny. I thought about my partner, about the life we had built, and a wave of shame washed over me. This wasn't who I was supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to even think these thoughts. But when the mind opens a door, sometimes it's impossible to close it again. The following days only made things worse. The bath moment became a shadow between us, an unspoken reminder that hovered whenever we were in the same space. He started to act differently, not in obvious ways, but subtle enough for me to notice. He found reasons to be near me, lingering in the kitchen while I cooked, asking me small questions he could have easily figured out himself. Sometimes he would brush past me, and though it could have been accidental, it felt intentional. One afternoon, I caught him watching me as I leaned over to pick something up. His eyes darted away when I looked up, but I had already seen enough. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a mixture of fear and something I didn't want to name. I wanted to tell him to stop, to set boundaries, to make sure nothing spiraled further. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed silent, and in that silence, something unspoken grew stronger. I told myself it was emotional confusion, that maybe I was projecting loneliness into a space where it didn't belong. After all, my partner had been distant lately, working long hours, coming home tired, barely speaking before falling asleep. The absence of attention, of intimacy, weighed heavily on me, and in that emptiness, my mind clung to the smallest gestures, magnifying them into something more than they should have been. It was easier to pretend I was just craving connection than to admit what was truly happening. But deep down, I knew. I knew that every time he smiled, every time his hand brushed mine while passing a plate or reaching for something, it was deliberate. And I knew that I had convinced myself that I could control it, that my silence would make the tension fade away with time. But silence doesn't erase desire, it only sharpens it. The more I tried to bury the thoughts, the stronger they pushed back. Every glance, every accidental touch, every lingering word grew heavier until it felt impossible to breathe when he was near me. One evening, it finally happened. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every sound, every breath. My partner had gone out again, leaving us alone. I told myself I would keep things normal, that nothing would happen, but the truth was that my mind had already betrayed me long before that night. We sat in the living room, a comfortable distance apart, yet the air between us buzzed with unspoken words. I could feel him looking at me, waiting for something. My heart raced, my hands fidgeted, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't meet his eyes. And then, without thinking, I did. Our eyes locked, and in that gaze, everything we had been avoiding spilled into the open. There were no words at first. Just silence, heavy and suffocating, as though the entire world had shrunk into that moment. I should have stood up, walked away, drawn the boundary that needed to exist. But I didn't. I stayed, frozen in place, unable to break free from the pull between us. Finally, he said it softly, cautiously, as though testing the air. He admitted that he had felt something that night in the bathroom, that he couldn't stop thinking about it. His voice trembled, but it wasn't uncertainty I heard, it was desire. My chest tightened, and I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Hearing him say it made it real. It was no longer a ghost in my mind. It was alive, standing in front of me, demanding to be acknowledged. I tried to respond, to tell him it was wrong, to shut it down before it could go any further. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I whispered his name, my voice breaking under the weight of everything I wasn't supposed to feel. And in that moment, the distance between us collapsed. The first touch was hesitant, trembling, as though both of us expected the other to pull away. But neither of us did. His hand brushed against mine, and instead of retreating, I let it stay. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. When he leaned closer, I should have stopped it. I should have pushed him away. But I didn't. Our lips met, tentative at first, then deeper, hungrier, as though all the weeks of silence had been leading to this one forbidden act. It was a rush of heat and shame tangled together, a storm of desire and regret unfolding at once. Every part of me screamed that it was wrong, that I was crossing a line I could never uncross. And yet I couldn't stop. The more I tried to think, the more I drowned in the feeling of it, the way it consumed every corner of me. When it was over, we both sat in silence, the weight of what we had done pressing down like a heavy curtain. My breath was unsteady, my body trembling, but it wasn't from excitement anymore. It was from fear, from the crushing realization that we had shattered something fragile and irreplaceable. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't bear to see the reflection of my own mistake mirrored in his eyes. My chest ached, my throat burned, and my mind screamed with one thought over and over again. What have I done? The line had been crossed, not just in thought, not just in silence, but in reality. And as much as part of me had wanted it in that moment, every part of me knew it would haunt me forever. The morning after felt like waking up in a world I no longer recognized. The air was heavy, the silence unbearable. I moved around the house quietly, every sound echoing like a reminder of what had happened. My body felt heavy, as though guilt itself had settled into my bones. I couldn't meet his eyes. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without feeling sick. When he finally appeared, the room grew colder. He gave me a small, nervous smile, but I couldn't return it. I forced myself to look away, pretending to busy myself with the smallest tasks just to avoid facing the truth that stood in front of me. Nothing was the same anymore. We had crossed a line that could never be erased, and the weight of that reality pressed down harder with each passing moment. Inside, I was unraveling. My mind screamed with questions that had no answers. What had I done to my family? What had I done to myself? I had betrayed not only my partner, but the trust that had been placed in me as a figure of care and responsibility. I had taken something fragile and sacred and shattered it in one impulsive act. And no matter how much I wished to turn back time, there was no undoing it. Every little thing became a reminder. A laugh, a glance, even the sound of footsteps in the hallway, it all sent me spiraling back to that night, replaying the mistake over and over again. It wasn't passion anymore. It wasn't desire. It was a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, a secret that poisoned every corner of my mind. The guilt began to consume everything I did. Around my partner, I felt like a stranger. I couldn't hold their gaze, couldn't accept their affection without flinching inside. Every hug, every kind word felt undeserved, as though I were wearing a mask that was slipping with every second. I found myself pulling away, avoiding intimacy, drowning in the fear that the truth would somehow show on my face. Paranoia crept in. I imagined him telling someone, imagined my partner noticing the smallest change in my behavior. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak of the house, terrified that the world would crash down on me at any moment. And in those sleepless hours, the regret only grew heavier. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal so deep it left me hollow. He, on the other hand, seemed caught between confusion and curiosity. Sometimes he acted as though nothing had happened, chatting casually, smiling easily. Other times, I caught him looking at me with an expression I couldn't bear, an expression that carried both longing and accusation. I wanted to scream, to tell him it could never happen again, that we had to bury it forever. But my voice always failed me. The silence remained, and in that silence, the guilt multiplied. I began to see everything differently. The walls of the house felt smaller, tighter, suffocating. The simple routines of daily life became unbearable. Cooking dinner, folding clothes, watching television, things that once felt ordinary now carried the weight of a lie hanging over them. I was living in the same place, with the same people, but I was no longer the same person. I had destroyed something within myself, and I couldn't put it back together. The worst part wasn't the fear of being discovered. The worst part was knowing the truth would never leave me. Even if no one else found out, I would carry it forever. It would live inside me, poisoning every moment, every relationship, every quiet second I had with my own thoughts. I had allowed a single moment of weakness to unravel everything I thought I stood for. And so here I am, left with nothing but regret. Regret for the silence I kept, regret for the boundaries I didn't set, regret for the choices I made when I knew better. I betrayed my partner, I betrayed my role, and most of all, I betrayed myself. Some mistakes can be forgiven. Some wounds can heal. But this isn't one of them. This is the kind of mistake that weight of what I've done